Most modern Christians have no idea that the word hell is an indirect pagan loanword, and when used in English, it's actually used in place of 4 different words in the Bible: Sheol, Hades, Gehenna, and Tartarus. And each of those words meant something a little bit different, which is why there's a whole lot of confusion and varying beliefs within Christianity as to what hell actually is. So in a prior video, I talked about the etymology of hell, which led to a spirited discussion on the history of Sheol and Hades and where these terms have been translated as hell in the Bible, and also how a lot of our modern ideas about hell just aren't in the Bible, like Satan and demons torturing human souls, Satan ruling in hell, all that stuff. It's not in the Bible, but there was a word that was translated into hell in English, a word that Jesus used that struck absolute terror into the hearts of ancient Jews: Gehenna. Today's video, it might just set you on fire. And let's just get it out of the way. Sorry, Margaret, Gehenna was not a garbage dump outside the walls of ancient Jerusalem. Oh, baby, it's time to check that cognitive dissonance and get ready, because the factual history on this one is going deep. So stick around to the very end. Gehenna is the term Jesus really used to depict the destiny of the wicked. And Jesus is the one who uses this term in the Gospels, and it also makes one appearance in the book of James. Gehenna is a Greek transliteration of the Hebrew Gehinnom. In the Old Testament, Gehinnom is a place name of a specific valley southwest of Jerusalem. And geographically, it's used 13 times in the Hebrew Bible, in Joshua 15 and 18 as a geographical place, in 2 Kings 23, 2 Chronicles 28 and 33, and Jeremiah 32, it's reference to historical events. And this is the important part. It's mentioned 5 times in Jeremiah in prophecies where God will punish those who have abandoned the Israelite faith. And it's the valley referred to in Jeremiah 31 and Isaiah 66. Because Gehinnom had a nasty history. It's where King Ahaz established pagan sacrifices, where children were passed through the fire, with Jewish traditions saying that they were burned alive. 2 Kings 16:3 says Ahaz sacrificed his own sons there, and 2 generations later, King Manasseh did the same thing in 2 Kings 21. 2 generations after that, Josiah became king, and he initiated vast reforms in 2 Kings 23 to purify the land and centralize worship in Jerusalem. And one of his targets was the Valley of Gehinnom, which now had the name the Place of Fire. Josiah's reforms were brutal. 2 Chronicles records Josiah of burning the bones of dead pagan priests on their altars, cleansing Judah and Jerusalem from sin. That's what happened in this valley. But the memory of what happened in the Valley of Gehenna didn't just vanish. Later prophets like Jeremiah and Isaiah made tons of visual callbacks to this valley because it was powerful imagery for people who loved powerful imagery. Gehenna is strongly alluded to in Isaiah 66, which if you know your links between the Old and New Testaments, you know Isaiah 66 was a favorite of Jesus in his teachings. And Isaiah 66 depicts a future battle outside Jerusalem where God protects the righteous inside the city while destroying the wicked outside the city with fire and sword, with the righteous overlooking the dead bodies in the valley where the worm does not die and the fire is not quenched. Jesus' imagery is undeniably connected to Jeremiah, portraying a terrible battle where the dead are left unburied and consumed by scavengers. And this theme is further linked to the Valley of Slaughter in Jeremiah, as expressed in Isaiah 30, where it refers to the great day of slaughter associated with Israel's salvation and the defeat of her enemies on the day of the Lord. Now you might be saying, Ken, what the heck does any of this have to do with hell? In Hebraic consciousness, the people who Jesus was speaking to, Gehenna symbolized a place of utter annihilation. And come closer, this might upset you. Let me use this chance to address a well-known myth that's shared as truth in a number of study Bibles and seminaries all over the place online. It was even taught to me when I was in school that Gehenna was a garbage dump outside the city of Jerusalem where refuse, trash, and even dead bodies were thrown into and buried. That's a myth. Because number one, there's 0 archaeological evidence of Gehenna being used as a garbage dump. The garbage dumps of ancient Jerusalem have been discovered on the southeast side of the city. Number 2, there are 0 attestations of Gehenna being a garbage dump. And number 3, the earliest mention anyone can find of Gehenna being a burning garbage dump comes from a Jewish rabbi circa 1200 AD named David Kimhi in his commentary to Psalm 27. He had never even been to Jerusalem and said himself that he was making an allusion. The earliest reference to Gehenna as a garbage dump came 1200 years after Jesus. But the valley of Gehenna, aka Gehenna, was full of powerful imagery for ancient Jews. And during the intertestamental period and the rise of apocalyptic literature that were popular at the time, like Enoch, and as the Hebraic views of the afterlife took on a greater depth, like we talked about last video, during this period in many Jewish sects, such as the Essenes and Pharisees, Gehenna evolved to represent a place of continued torment after death. And that idea of torment in the afterlife continued well after Christ, demonstrated in pseudepigraphal writings like the Apocalypse of Abraham, to Baruch, and in the Mishnah and Talmud, particularly in the 4th century AD. So historically, and just like the other 3 words translated as hell, there's a shift in the understanding of what Gehenna actually was over time. Now, all the history aside, let's talk about Jesus' references to Gehenna, because Jesus mentions Gehenna a lot in Matthew 8 times, Mark 3 times, and Luke once. So if it's not a mythical garbage dump, we have to ask, why did Jesus use this imagery? So when Jesus used the word Gehenna, he is masterfully invoking powerful imagery established by Gehenna's history and Old Testament allusions in Isaiah and Jeremiah to describe the fate of the wicked upon God's final judgment. And it freaking worked, because here we are 2,000 years later and we're still talking about it. But when you understand the history of the Gehenna Valley and the way that the ancient Jews regarded it and its references, all of a sudden, things make more sense. And here's a big clue. When Jesus used the term Gehenna, there's something modern readers miss. Go look at Matthew 5:22, 5:29, 5:30, 10:28, 18:9, Mark 9:43, 9:45, 9:47, and Luke 12:5. When Jesus uses Gehenna, it's uniquely linked to the body. Its use in Matthew and Mark describes it as a place where sinners face consequences using vivid imagery of mutilated body parts. Mark 9:43 advises cutting off a sinful hand, stating it's better to be maimed than go into Gehenna. Jesus extends this metaphor to feet and eyes, creating a comparison between losing a body part and the total loss represented by Gehenna. And when you understand it this way, the message is clear. Address and recognize your sin, or it will lead to your complete destruction. And he uses these references from Isaiah and Jeremiah to pull this point home for his Jewish audience, who would have completely understood what he was wanting them to visualize. Jesus' use of Gehenna's imagery draws from scenes of devastation in Jeremiah's valley of slaughter and Isaiah's battle and resulting massacre. And Jesus, quoting Isaiah 66, intertwines these images of an unquenchable fire and undying worms to paint a grim picture of this complete and final destruction of wickedness and evil. And this fire is described as unquenchable, irresistible, fully consuming, and reducing everything to nothing, burning up whatever it touches. And references there are Ezekiel 20:47 through 48, Amos 5:5 through 6, and Matthew 3:12. It's terrifying imagery of the inevitability and thoroughness of God's destruction of wickedness and evil. And the real kicker here is that understanding Gehenna isn't just about unpacking ancient words or frightening someone into saying a prayer that's not in the Bible so they don't wake up in hell tomorrow. It's about realizing why Jesus used this potent symbol. Not to terrify us into compliance, but to shake us into self-examination and personal and social accountability. Jesus wielded the image of Gehenna not for just its horror, but as a dramatic call to physical and spiritual integrity. In essence, Gehenna transcends fiery imagery to become a stark emblem of divine justice and the high stakes of our choices when we choose to live lives of selfishness. It's a call to arms, urging us to steer our lives towards righteousness, to rethink our action, and to align ourselves more closely with what God envisions for us. It's answering the call of, how are we to live? Are we to love God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love others as we love ourselves? Or is it about selfishly getting ours and feeding our base desires, caring not a whit for others? When Jesus uses the word Gehenna, it's not about theology. It's about spiritual transformation. It's about carrying the gravity of Jesus' teachings into our daily lives and helping us become who God created us to be. Not just fearing judgment, but actively living lives that echoes the goodness and love of our Creator. It's about how we choose to release heaven here on earth as it is in heaven. God bless. See you soon.